Welcome to the Lessons for Living television program. My name is Bill Santos. Thank you so much for watching. Well, on this week's program, we have once again our special guests, our regulars.
We just got
promoted, man.
That's
Yep.
right.
Oh, we're regulars
Yeah,
now?
we're regulars now.
I'm signing on. Does this pay a lot?
No.
No.
No, that's the one thing it doesn't. It doesn't. Pastor Shawn, Pastor Alex, welcome back.
Thank you.
We've enjoyed so much. I've really appreciated all the discussion we've had, and I know our viewers, the feedback we're getting is quite positive about your participation here. And so just want to thank you for that. And wanted to dwell a little bit today and sort of pick your brains on...
Oh, that won't take long.
on...
Sean's a little empty up there.
That's right.
Yeah,
Well, what,
that's
yeah,
all
well,
right.
you know what?
That's what his wife says.
That's right.
You do it with a teaspoon. Yeah.
You know, as we look at, you know, the Christian church, particularly in the Western world, the challenge, I think one of the biggest challenges we face is portraying religion in a way in Jesus Christ that is relevant. You know, here's what I find, and I don't know if you guys see this in your neighborhood. You know, I have my neighbors, they know I'm a pastor,
Yep.
and they respect that. You know, there's still an element of respect in most places, right, for clergy, right? And so when we're out there working on our gardens or whatever, golfing with them, you know, and four-letter word comes out, they make a point of turning around and, oh, sorry, you know.
Sorry, Pastor.
Sorry, Pastor,
Right,
you know what I
right.
mean? And so they respect religion, they don't mock it, they just don't see a relevance for their life.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
I mean, it's great if it works for you,
Yeah.
and that helps you, that's great. And I'll fight for your right to worship and to be able to go and the government not restricting that. But there's no relevance for me. And what you find many times, it's when disaster enters the home
Yeah.
that they run. And like you guys must deal with that all the time as you travel
Yeah.
the world and present your seminars and, you know, and
You know, I think that for me, religion, church, let's just say church, has become a sit back religion. We sit back. We like to go to church. We like to sing the songs. We like to go through the motions, and then we sit in our pews waiting for Jesus to come. And the promise, of course, is that there will be a second advent. That there will be a second coming. Jesus will come to take his people. But in the meantime, what are we supposed to be doing as a people of God? And I think that's where many have failed. Many Christians have fallen short. There was some years ago that we had built this nice-sized church in a prominent town. Had a beautiful corner, a prominent corner in that town. And yes, we'd been through the building process for a while. But as soon as we were done, the property across the street came up for sale. It was 10 acres. And I remember talking to our church clerk and saying, can you find out how much that is? I mean, how beautiful would that be? We can build a school, we can put a community center there. There's so much we can do in that particular corner. And so she did, and she called back, she says, it's $4 million. And I said, $4 million, that's it? I mean, you know, God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. All
Yes.
the gold and all the silver is his. And so I said, let's buy it. And she was like, Pastor, that's a whole lot of money. But we looked into it, and you know, the church had a lot of faith in what they had built. It's an amazing church. But it was just difficult to get to the next hump. And long story short, we didn't get the property. We saw a notice, city notice, that they were dealing with some zoning issues. And when we read the notice, we realized that the largest liquor store in the county was going to go right
Across the
there,
street from your
across
church.
from our church.
Handy.
And where we were going to put a school. Well, actually, that's funny that you say handy. So we went down there. We're like, man, we're going to put a school right near that. I don't know if that's the best place. And so they gave us 5 minutes there at City Hall or this kind of meeting, City Hall meeting, and we to sort of make our point. The time for objecting was already passed. Now they were just looking at a zoning issue, but they gave us 5 minutes. And so the conference that we worked with, the representatives came and made their 5-minute appeal. And after it was all said and done, those that were sitting on that city council board looked at each other and they said, well, at least when the parents go pick up their kids, they can drive by the liquor store and get their liquor and go home. And everybody just started laughing. And I remember walking out thinking to myself, we didn't have one person supporting us in this meeting.
Wow.
Not one. And I had to ask myself, why is that? And I realized that as wonderful as church had been, as wonderful as building had been, and the church was growing, the one thing that we had not done is actually make ourselves relevant to the community.
Right.
And I've often thought that had we been in the community and become a staple in the community, where they can depend on us. They something happens, they're like, we know that
These
that
folks
church
are here,
will be
yeah.
here. These are our friends. It wouldn't have mattered if the whole community had wanted that liquor store there because their friends didn't want it.
Yes.
They would have been on our side.
Right.
But they weren't. And as I look at churches, around North America and in Canada, I see the very same thing. There's very little happening in the community. In fact, most people don't even know your church is there.
Yes.
I was just talking to the pastors of the church that I attend to when I'm in town, and I said, do you know that I can go from one side of town to the other side of town and not even know that the church exists. I don't see anything. There's nothing that tells me there's a church out here, that there's a caring church, that there's a family church, that there's programming. There's nothing. The only thing that the community gets is once in a while, when they have some kind of program in the church, they'll mail the community and say, hey, come to this particular program.
Right.
But they've built no rapport. They've built no strings, there's no process of making friends and relationships out there, and I think that's one of our biggest issues. When you look at Genesis chapter 1, God said, "Let us make man in our image." The Godhead is in community.
Right.
When you look at Genesis chapter 2, it's a fascinating story. God spends time with man, then He puts man to sleep. God spends time with woman, then He brings man and woman together. It's a unity of three. It's in community, but we have forgotten community.
Yes.
And I think that because of that, we are not very relevant at all for the community. We can be. We have some of the best and greatest tools that the community needs, but we're kind of like Israel. We're keeping them Israel of old, keeping it to ourselves, when the whole purpose is bless the world with what you have. And I think that's one of the biggest problems we have.
A guy that you and I both worked for in the past that is now deceased, Elder Dan Jackson, used to say, if your church burned to the ground, would anyone know? Would anyone care?
Right. No.
Would anyone in your community care?
It's true. And sadly, I think, to add to that, I agree. We're invisible. Christians are invisible, but when they are visible, they're often visible for all the wrong reasons. What we love to do is come out of our hut once in a while and tell the world what they're doing wrong, and we're right and you're wrong, and go back inside. And it's like, so really, why would anybody come? Why would I go to your church Sunday morning when the only thing I know about you is either you keep to yourself, or B, you show up at a meeting to tell me what's wrong with me?
I'm lost.
Yeah. And it's true. And I know what it means to be lost. People are lost without Christ. But the messaging we get, here's what I've often told churches. I said, look, do you understand that it's more important to be loving than it is to be right? And people have said, no, Shawn, you got to be right. I didn't say it's not important to be right. It's important to know what truth is. It's important to understand the scriptures. But where did Jesus place the emphasis?
Right.
There's an important story, where it says, and I think it's John chapter 4. I'm like the Apostle Paul. I always have to say somewhere it is written. You notice he can't ever remember where. But I think it's John chapter 4. If it's not there, folks, it's in 5 or 6, but I'm pretty sure 4. And it says Jesus was going home to Galilee. And it says he must needs, the old King James comes to mind, he must needs go through Samaria. He had to go through Samaria, I think of the ESV. And I don't want to argue with an inspired author of the Bible, John. He's smarter than me, he wrote under inspiration, but that's not technically correct. You didn't have to go through Samaria to go home from Jerusalem. There was another road that everybody took. It was the long way around, because they said the Samaritans.
I'm not going through there.
The Assyrians planted those people there. They had a compromised religion. They had a rewrite of the Old Testament. There's still 1,100 Samaritans in this world today. Did you know that? Practicing Samaritans. I have a copy of their scriptures. They did a little minor rewrite so that Mount Gerizim is now the holy mountain, and you'd be defiled if you went through there. So there was the long way around. It wasn't geographical necessity that made Jesus go through Samaria. It wasn't geographic. It was people. There's a woman sitting there who's rejected by the community. She gets her water in the heat of the day because she's a homewrecker and doesn't want to gather water with the other women anymore. That's why Jesus had to go. She's there. And there's been this long sentiment for centuries among Christians, and I think it's correct, that before Jesus comes, we will see Jesus perfectly reproduced in the church. And what some Christians think is, well, then my behavior is going to be just perfect. I'm going to carry a clipboard with behavior on it. I don't swear and I don't...
Like the rich young ruler.
Yeah, check, 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 check. And we basically want to turn that around and say to God, look, aren't you lucky to have me?
That's right.
And if I use the language God uses in the Old Testament, God answers, you smell bad.
Yes.
You stink.
Yes.
No, that's not what this is about. So then Jesus tells a story. A man beaten up on the way to Jericho. It's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Jericho, of course they get beat up. And the Pharisees are listening. And a Levite and a priest go by and don't help this guy who's beat up. And the Pharisees are delighted. They don't like priests and Levites. Oh, of course they walked on the other side of the street. And the Pharisees were known for giving alms. That was their big thing. Help the poor, help the poor, help the poor. And they're waiting. Okay, there's always three parts to it.
He's going to be the hero.
Here comes the Pharisee. What does Jesus pull out of his hat?
The Samaritan.
The Samaritan. The Samaritan's theologically wrong. How dare he? It's more important to be loving than to be right. And Christians will say again to me, Shawn, what? You have to be right. Yeah, of course you got to be right, but it's more important to be loving. That's what Jesus was, more important. And I ask Christians, how right do you think you are? We're right. Okay. If your guardian angel showed up to give you a Bible study tonight on your spirituality, do you think you would do well? Do you think you got it all right, or do you think there's a lot to learn yet? I think if we were to have that attitude that Christianity began with, we were the low outcasts of Roman society. We were nobodies, but we loved. Yeah, we were right too, but we loved. And sometimes all we ever do is come out to prove how right we are, and we want to debate, and we want to argue, and what if we love people? What if we loved people?
Wow.
Yeah, you know, I was looking at lighthouses in Ireland. We had an opportunity to go to Ireland back in November, and a couple of days there during the week where we didn't have appointments on the weekends, my wife and I just traveled around the coast, the southern coast, going from lighthouse to lighthouse, and there was one that was off the beaten path, just way out. In fact, the weather was so bad getting to it, we almost turned around. But there was this hotel out in the middle of nowhere that we passed, and when I read the sign on there, it said that the hotel was closed because it was housing Ukrainians.
Oh, okay.
And I remember thinking to myself, I wonder if one of our churches would say, "Hey, we're closed because we're housing Ukrainians." I just don't know that they're, and I don't want to pick on I don't want to just blanket statement.
No, churches are doing lots, right?
There's a lot that's happening.
I love church,
but are we willing to sacrifice?
Yeah.
Are we willing to sacrifice our facility? Our manpower, our money, our funds? Our time going into, if it's not the Ukrainians, but there's needs right in our community right now. Do we know what those needs are? Are we spending the time with the community trying to figure out, where does it hurt, and is this church able to help where it hurts? I think that we would see a lot more success in becoming relevant if we were to take that kind of approach.
Many years ago, I was out. I had a F-150. I got a flat tire. Didn't have a spare. Put my hand in my back pocket. Didn't have my wallet. Well before cell phones. It was the afternoon. I started walking down the street. First place I come to is a strip joint. So I'm going to go in. I'm going to ask them to use the phone. I'm going to call for help. I go in. I ask the bartender, "Can I use a phone?" And he goes over to remember those days you have to go get the phone and bring it over?
Yeah, long cord came into the bar. I mean, I've never been in a bar.
That's right. So I hear this voice comes out of the darkness. "What kind of a truck?" And I said, "Sorry, what kind of a truck?" I said, "It's a F-150. And out of the darkness comes this mountain of a man, right? And he says, "Come with me." And he takes me to the doors of the strip joint. Pulls out his car keys, gives me his keys, says, "Take this car, it's my car, take it down the street here, make a left, you see a body shop, go in, speak to so-and-so, ask them to get you the tire out of the such and such a car, and that'll fit your truck." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Take my car and go."
A stranger gives you his car keys.
My car keys. I said, you're just going to give me your car keys? He says, what, are you going to steal my car? Well, no. He says, I got nothing to worry about. And I go there where he tells me, I get the tire, I take it back, put it on my truck, drive his car back. I don't have my wallet. I go, dude, this is going to sound like a story, but I don't have my wallet. I can't pay it. So I don't want any money. I said, well, wait a second. So I went back the next day. I made a note of where it was. I went back. He wouldn't take any money. I ended up going to Tim Hortons and buying up some coffee and donuts for his staff, because that was the only way. And so that happened, that's got to be more than 40 years ago. I think about that story almost every day. Because I think in my church, if someone had showed up at my church and said, listen, my car broke down, would I be willing to hand them my car keys?
Yeah. And
say, here, take my car and go solve your problem. And then when it's all solved, just come back. I don't know. I'm almost embarrassed to tell that. Do you know what I mean? Because that's not what you expect coming out of a strip joint. That's what you expect coming out of a church.
Yeah, I'm glad the story went the way it was. Suddenly I thought, the strippers are going to help him change the tire. That's what's going to happen here. Yeah, no, but you're right. So often, people go to the bartender's often their pastor.
Yes.
It's their pastor. And we're not doing, here's, I think, one of the issues that we've had in the 20th century leading into the 21st is we've tried to remake God in our image over and over and over again. In the 60s, he's a liberation fighter in the jungles of, we sign him up for whatever our cause. In the 80s, he's a Wall Street tycoon. Then he's a social justice warrior. Then he's a communist. That was in one of the more recent American presidential elections. They were comparing he's just like Jesus. And we keep remaking. But what if we were trying to remake our church in his image?
Right.
Right? We're supposed to be recapturing the image of God among God's people, not the other way around. We keep remaking, we sign up Jesus for every cause we want, and he's trying to sign us up for his cause. And again, that's what you just proved. You remember that. How do most people remember? What's the number one story people get? And I get it. Everybody loves to be down on churches, and you have to take it with a grain of salt. But what's the number one story you get? I went to a church, and what's the next thing you expect to hear? Bad news.
Yes.
Yeah.
They were rude to me.
They were rude.
Yes,
they
they
didn't
judged
talk to me.
me.
Yeah. And
well, it's fascinating because you talked about the Samaritan, and then we have the story of Elijah, and he's swept away to the widow, and she's taken care of, and Jesus himself. I've not found such great faith in his. Why is it that the great faith and the great acts like this have to be found outside of the church?
Well, you would normally think they would be.
Yeah. Why can't they be inside of the church? That's what we've been called to do. We've been called to sacrifice for those that are out there, those that are in need. That's what Jesus came to do, to seek and to save that which was lost, to heal the brokenhearted, to free the captives. We talk about abolition. Well, the entire book of the Bible is an abolitionist book. That's what Jesus came to do, to free the captive. What if we had the same desire, the same passion? Our desire is to free men and women from the captivity of the things that are holding them down. And look around, turn on the news. It's a mess. We're broken. We're so broken. Yes. And here we have the Bible itself, the answers to all this brokenness, and yet we're holding it tight. Yes, hold it tight because we need it for ourselves. But we've got to get out there and share it.
Yeah, the prodigal son wanted to leave the presence of his father because he wanted freedom.
Yeah.
And then realizes that he's enslaved out in the world, and freedom is found back in the loving embrace of his father's house, in his father's house.
Fascinating. That American slaveholders in the 19th century people said the slave should have a Bible. They had to rewrite it. They had to I have a copy of it. They had to cut 2/3 out because otherwise the slaves would get the idea that they should be free.
Wow.
They had to trim 2/3 of the Bible out. And today people think Christians are oppressive. It's our behavior that's doing it. It's not what's in that book. The book's not oppressive. They wouldn't let slaves read it because they would hope for liberty if they did. Interestingly enough, the whole book of Exodus is practically gone. It's practically gone, yeah.
But that's true. That the entire book has been designed to set us free from the chains that hold us. And yeah, I can see it. Anybody that would read that and read the whole thing, which is what we've been talking about, read the entire thing, you'll see that there is freedom on the wings of what Jesus has to offer.
I think, Shawn, you hit, where you say there's an inconsistency between what we say and how we live.
Oh, yeah.
Right? We love to debate theology. Like we love to talk theology. You know, I've often thought, I wonder if one of the reasons why Paul had so much impact was that there was this coherence between how he lived his life and the messages that he spoke. Like when people heard him speak, they knew this guy lives this. Like this is not just from the mouth, you know, out. This is his life. This is how he
Paul
lived.
and Paul, of course, is out there working with them as a tent maker. So he's one of them, and we have found that that's the greatest impact that an individual can make. You're sweating out there with them. You're working side by side. You're feeling even Jesus on the road to Emmaus, walking with these individuals. He's walking the same walk. He's talking the same talk. He's tripping over the same stones. There's this building of community when you walk it together. Can we do the same thing?
Yeah. I tell you, again, you know, we're so worried that if we're not right about everything, we're not modeling God. The whole point of the Bible is you're broken.
Right.
You're broken. What if we could be honest at church? Now, I'm not into let's rehearse every sin I've ever committed. I don't like giving the devil free airtime for the way he ruined my life.
That's right.
But at the same time, why can't we admit we're all there because we're broken? And there's only one man who's never sinned. Only one. And it's not me, it's Jesus. That honesty would go so far. I have one of my very best friends who won't see this show. She's in another country. She's dying. She left church years ago because she left her husband. And she left her husband because he was kicking the stuffing out of her with steel-toed boots every night. And finally, for the sake of her kids, left. And on church, because we know God's will is for marriages to survive. But Jesus said, because of the way the world is, sometimes this happens. They called her, I'll clean it up, called her a prostitute from the front of the platform for ending her marriage at the front of the church. Never been back since. She's dying now, and she's come back to Christ. I pray with her every week, and it's more important. The ideal is a healthy marriage. They don't all make it. Jesus said so. They don't all make it, and sometimes it has to end. It's more important to be loving than to be right.
Well, years ago when I was at It Is Written, I was at the airport here in Toronto waiting on a guest that was arriving for a fundraising weekend we were doing. And I'm just standing there waiting, and a police officer comes over on one of those Segways. And he asked me, what am I doing here? And I'm thinking, why would he single me out of all the people that are here? What is it about me that was suspicious? And I said, well, I'm waiting for a gentleman that's coming from South Africa. He's going to speak at a fundraising. What do you do? I said, I'm a pastor. He says, what church? I said, well, I have a television program. I said, It Is Written. He goes, oh, the George Vanderbilt program.
No kidding.
I said, well, how do you know the George Vanderbilt program? It was the original, right? And he said, oh, I grew up in a church that, frequented a church here very close by. I said, wow, what church? He said, he gave the name of the church. It was a Seventh-day Adventist church. And I said, wow, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist pastor. Look at that, of all the people you were drawn to me. So what was that experience like for you? He says, it was great until my parents divorced and nobody ever called us ever again.
Oh, mercy.
Amazing. Yeah, again.
And I said, dude,
are they right? Is it better? Does God want the marriage to succeed? Yes, that's right. But what is God asking us to be in this world? Salt and light.
Exactly right.
Be the Samaritan.
We got 30 seconds left.
That's because Alex was so yappy again.
Well, I think in the love. The love.
I think that's what it boils down
of
to
God,
at the end of the day.
And that's why we're all Christians, right?
That's right.
He loved us, and because he loved us and showed us what real love is.
That's right.
That's the love we want to gravitate to, and we got to share it to others.
That's right. Thank you, guys. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we just ask that as we contemplate your love and your goodness, that your Holy Spirit will just operate in our lives, that we may share that with others, and that they may see that love in our lives and be drawn to you. That is our prayer. In Jesus' name. Amen. Well, we've come to the end of another program. I want to thank Pastor Shawn, Pastor Alex for joining us. Hey, tell us what's going on in Calgary right now. Some exciting stuff going on.
We started just a couple of days ago, April 14. We're at the Wind Sports Center. We're doing a free seminar called Revelation Speaks Peace. You've already missed 2 nights, but I'll catch you up if you show up. You can still reserve a seat or just come on down. And 7 p.m. at the Windsport Arena.
What are you talking about tonight?
Tonight is going to be the Battle of Armageddon. What does the Bible say? What does it not say? And what I'll do is I'm going to show you how the first century would have read Revelation 16. We're going to learn some basic principles of how to read these ancient apocalyptic books, how a first century audience would have read them, and the tools you need to make it make perfect sense in this day and age. And we're going to go to Revelation 16, the Battle of Armageddon, and we're going to apply the tools we've learned so that by the end of it, you'll be able to tell me what it's talking about, how it fits, how it makes sense, what's really going on in this world. Going to be a war in the Middle East? You're going to have to come to find out. You know, somebody going to drop a nuke over, and you're going to have to come to find out. Is Armageddon going to be the next pandemic? You're going to have to come to find out. You know, I'm not going to tell you I want you to come down to the Winsport Arena. If you're in the Calgary area, you won't be sorry. I promise you, you'll learn more about the Bible in a few nights than you've learned up till this period, probably.
Excellent. We encourage everyone to attend. RevelationSpeaksPeace.com is the website where you can reserve your seat and make sure there's space there for you. We are all out of time. Remember to visit our website, l4ltv.com. There will be a link on the previous programs page to RevelationSpeaksPeace.com, where you can get more information on the ongoing seminars. I want to remind you also of Instagram. Follow me on Instagram every morning, 6:30 a.m. Eastern Time. A 1-minute devotional video goes out. You're going to want to start your day focused on things of heaven. MissionNowCanada.com is the website that covers some of the overseas humanitarian work that we do. Check that out. You may want to join us on an upcoming mission trip. We are all out of time. Thank you so much for watching. We hope to have you back with us again next time. God bless you. We'll see you then.